Hi, welcome to another Digital Photo Mentor video. In this tutorial, I'm going to walk you through step by step how to take multiple images shot using light painting, combine them into one final image using Photoshop. I'm going to go get set up, so I'll be right back. See you soon. Okay, so I'm over here in Lightroom now, and as you can see, I have a series of images that I shot with different lighting. I did an article on the website a little while ago. I'll link to it below the video or in this article if you're on the website so that you can see how I shot the car. And now what I'm going to do is show you how to combine these images into one. So there's a couple things you need to do. First of all, when you're shooting your pictures, you'll notice that the first couple I started off with a slightly different camera angle. So I moved to this angle. So you want to make sure that all of your images that you're going to combine were shot from the same camera angle and don't have any movement. So I'm going to eliminate the two that don't have the same camera angle. This is just a collection in Lightroom. Okay, so I haven't deleted them. I'm just taking them out of my collection. Okay, and just for the purpose of looking, this is our finished image. So this is what we want to have it look like when we're finished and we've combined all the images. And the images we're going to combine are all the others. So let's take a look at those. So we have the first one that has no light on the front of the car. Then I did a slightly longer exposure and a car was coming down the street, so the street is more lit up. Then we had a streak of light come through. Then my husband actually used his cell phone to light up the front of the car. And we did some varying different techniques to light from the side and also light up the headlights. Now, as you can see in this one, there's a ghost of him where he was moving and I caught him on the image. So that's going to get masked out when we combine that in Photoshop. And then another one where we had the headlights on. So we're going to be combining, in this case, 8 different images. And when we do that, we'll be able to pick and choose the parts that we use from each of them by using masking. Okay, so the first thing you want to do, like I said, is when you're shooting, make sure that you don't move your tripod. If you're doing light painting and you want to layer it like this, make sure your tripod is anchored in one spot and don't recompose or move your tripod. You can still do it in Photoshop and have it align them, but it doesn't do as good a job if they're all perfectly aligned when you shot them. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, if you're using Lightroom, just select all of the ones that you want to work with, as I have done here. So I've got everything selected except the one that's finished. And then right click on any of the thumbnails. And when that comes up, just choose Edit In. And the one that you're looking for is down here is Open as Layers in Photoshop. So I already have Photoshop running in the background. I use Photoshop Creative Cloud. This would work if you have Elements or Photoshop CS6 or any version that works with layers and masking. Okay, so I'm going to be working in Creative Cloud or CC, but the same is true of all of the other programs. Or even if you work with something like GIMP, anything that works with layers should be able to do this. Okay, so I'm going to open them as layers in Photoshop. So what that's going to do is it's going to take each of the 8 images over to Photoshop and open them as a separate layer. That's going to take probably a minute to do that, so I'm going to pause the video and I'll be right back when they're opened in Photoshop. Okay, I'm back. So the first thing you want to do is to find the darkest image. Okay, so the one that has the least amount of light on it or you haven't done any painting yet. So the easiest way to do that is to hold your Alt key and click the eyeball on one of the layers, which turns off all the rest. Okay, so it just means you're just seeing that one. So I've done that with the bottom one here. So currently we're viewing that, and I'm just going to turn them on and see if any of them are darker. So we're viewing each of them at 100% opacity. So as I turn each of them on, you're not seeing any of the layers below. You're just seeing that layer. Okay, so it looks like the bottom one, this one might be slightly darker. Let's compare, or they're very similar. Looks like we got the same image twice, so they're very similar. Very similar. So the first thing I'm actually going to do is delete one of these because it looks like I've got the exact same image twice. So we don't need extra layers. So we're going to delete that one. And we're going to start with this one on the bottom here. And what we're going to do is gradually, one by one, turn the lights on. Okay, so this one we're going to use all of. Okay, so this is our base layer. It is the darkest. Okay, when we go to the next layer, okay, what we're going to do is turn the lights on and change the layer blend mode. So this is up here in the layers panel. I'll zoom in so you can see it. Okay, so when you go up in your top right in your layers panel, you'll see something here that says normal and then the opacity. When you pull that down, that is the blend mode. So what this is setting is it's saying, how do I want to deal with this layer compared to the one underneath? Okay, anything that's in this section where it says darken and anything below in this section, it will only show things on the top layer that are darker than the layer below. Anything in this section where it says lighten, it will only show the lighter parts of the top layer compared to the bottom layer. The next section down where it starts with overlay, it will add contrast. So it actually combines them together. And then the bottom one is looking for differences, okay? And they have purposes, but we're not using them for this particular tutorial. So the one we're most concerned about here is lighten, because we want to know which parts are lighter in this image than the bottom one. So I'm just going to zoom back out again. Okay, so now watch what happens when I choose lighten. Okay, so what happens is you saw the parts that were on the bottom layer appear again. Okay, so this is the bottom layer. When I turn the lights on, only the parts that are lighter appear. Okay, now this is the one that's got our ghost. Okay, so we'll come back to that one in a little bit. But we're going to do that with each of the other layers. So we're going to turn them on, and we're going to change the blend mode to lighten. You can actually do this with all of them at once. If you select all of your layers, you have to turn them all on, of course, and change your blend mode to lighten. It will do that with all of them at once. Okay, so we're going to go back to our bottom layer and work one at a time now for our masking. Okay, so the first thing we did was we chose the bottom layer as our darkest image. We turned all the lights on by changing the blend mode to lighten on all of the top layers. The bottom one is still normal. And now we're going to go back and do our masking one by one. So I'm going to start with that Alt and eyeball click on the bottom one again, hides all the rest, and go one by one. The reason that it's easier to do one by one is you can see where the problem is on this particular image. Okay. Now for doing this type of editing, I actually use a tablet and a pen. I don't know if you can see this or not. So I use a tablet and a pen because as opposed to a mouse that's a little bit awkward for drawing and using a brush tool, the pen allows you to actually use the tablet and draw. So it makes it a little bit smoother. If you don't have a tablet, that's fine. You can use your mouse. So the first thing we're going to do is add a layer mask. You can do that right down here at the bottom of the layers palette. There's this little black and white, so it's a square, okay, with a circle inside, and it says add layer mask. Okay, and there's two ways to add a layer mask. Okay, you can add one just by clicking it, and it adds a white layer mask, which means that everything on this layer shows. Okay, I'm actually just going to undo that and show you what happens if we do the other way. Okay, if you hold your Alt key and click it though, you will get a black mask. See that? Okay, the difference being is that white reveals and black hides or conceals. So where you see black on the mask, this layer is not showing. So right now, none of this layer is showing. Okay. So we're going to actually paint in the parts that we want. Or you could do it the other way, is have the white mask and paint out the parts that you don't want. Okay. So I'm actually going to undo that. Let's do the white mask. So you kind of have to decide if more of your image is wanted or if you only want a little piece of it. It's easier to paint out if you want most of it. If you only want a little piece, it's easier to paint in. But you can go about it either way. So we're going to start with a white mask, which is everything showing. Then we're going to choose the brush tool. So you can do that just by clicking B on your keyboard, or you can select the brush tool over here. Okay, just the regular one. And then you want to make sure that your colors in your palette are showing black and white. Okay, And the easiest way to do that is to click D on your keyboard, which is for default colors. Okay, so that automatically gives you white on top, black on the bottom. If you want to reverse them, click X on your keyboard and it switches them. So now you have black on top, white on the bottom. Okay, so in this case, we want black because we're going to paint with black on the mask. Very important to make sure that you have the mask selected here. See the little outline around it, the little square, not the layer. Okay, we don't want to paint on the layer. We want to paint on the mask. Okay, so very important. Okay. So the next thing you want to do is select a brush size that's appropriate. This one here, your little crosshairs, is a little small. So by clicking the bracket keys, the square bracket keys, the right one makes it bigger. You can see it getting bigger. Okay? And the left one makes it smaller. Okay? So I want a fairly large brush. And in this case, I'm going to paint with 100% opacity, as you can see up here. You can also change the flow. So this is an advantage of working with a tablet as well, is it's pressure sensitive. So I can say 50% or I can say 100%, but if I only touch lightly, it gives me the pressure according to how hard I press. So if I press lightly, it gives me a fainter stroke, just as if you were using an actual brush. Okay, so now I know I don't want this part showing here where he's got a ghost, so I'm just going to start erasing. Okay, now can you see what the problem that's causing is it's a very hard edge brush and you can see the outline of the brush, right? So that's no good. So I'm just going to reverse my colors and paint it back in. Okay, so we want to be careful of two things. We want to be careful of having a soft edge brush so that it blends nicely, okay, unless you have a really careful edge. And you want to leave the parts that you have the light where it's nice. So I'm going to start down the bottom here. Let's try 100% down here. Oh, X to switch colors back. So let's start down here. Okay, so I kind of like what's happening there because it's making the street darker again. We've got that hard edge brush. So now see, we got to keep going because we can see the edge of the brush, but that looks pretty good there. Okay, so as long as we followed the edge there, let's get a little softer edge brush. Right click and change the hardness. So 100% hardness is a very defined line edge of your brush. Less hardness is very soft. So if we take a look at the difference here, okay, so if I paint there, you can see it fades out, okay, versus 100% gives you a very hard edge. So let's go and do this guy out of here, out of the window. And maybe that's all we want to do. So we've just gotten rid of his reflection. We could get rid of it on here too, but I kind of like it lighting up the license plate. We can make my brush a little smaller. You can change your opacity just by hitting your keyboard. I hit number 3 and it changes it to 30%. So I'm actually just going to very carefully, just ever so slightly, paint out that reflection there of his leg. So let's see what it was like before. Okay, so that's no first layer, second first layer on. Okay, doing good things. I like what that's doing. Okay, if we want to see the mask, you can actually hold the shift key and click the mask to turn off the layer mask for the moment. So now you can see, okay, we did get the ghost. He's gone. Perfect. So we move on to our next layer. Remember, turn the eyeball on, but you actually have to be on the layer. So make sure you're on the layer. Okay, so is this layer even doing anything? Let's take a look. I'll just turn it off and on a bunch of times. I don't see that it's doing a whole great deal. Maybe brightening up the corner of the car a little bit here on the sky. But I'm not convinced that we even need that layer. So let's see the next one. Okay, that one's doing some really nice things on the grill. I like what that's doing. Let's go to the next one. That's got some nice things on the headlights again. We could probably use some of that. That one's lighting up underneath the car. That's cool. We got some cobblestones. And this one might be duplicating as well. Oh, it's lighting up that doorway over there. So that's kind of cool. So I don't think that this one is doing anything that we really need. So I'm going to delete that one as well. The more layers you have in your file, the bigger your overall file is going to be. And the slower your computer may work on it, right? So delete the ones that you just don't even need. So we started with 8 and we're down to 6 now, right? So I turned on the next one, and we got a little bit of ghost over here again. So we're going to add our layer mask. And I'm going to paint out again, just like I did last time. So I want to paint with black. And I'll start with 30% just to see if I can paint it out gently, because we want to make sure it blends nice. That looks pretty good. Okay, let's do a before and after again. Is there anywhere else I want to get rid of? Okay, it's lighting up this wall over here as well, and it's kind of getting rid of our streak. There's a little bit of streak here. I don't really want that. So you see these little light bugs here? Let's get rid of those. Let's see this little bug here. Let's get rid of that. Oh, that one's on a different layer. You know, it's also lighting up the ground in front of the car, and I think I prefer it having it darker. So I'm actually going to paint some of this out, and I'm going to use 50% opacity, so that's a 5. So see, I'm just making a broad sweep to get rid of some of that. Okay, probably do a little bit more. You don't want to eliminate shadows when you're doing this type of thing. When you're doing light painting, you want to make sure that you keep texture, which is why we lit it from the side and we turned the headlights on. And you want to make sure that you keep some shadows, because a shadowless image is just has no depth. Okay, so like what's happening there. Do you see any other bugs? I think that looks pretty good. Okay, now the next one. Okay, we got another ghost, so we'll make a layer mask. You know, the other thing that you can do is, this one has got, the street is really bright and the streak of light going by is really bright. So you can actually turn the opacity of the layer down, right? So if we decide we like what's happening here overall, but we just don't want it quite so bright, you could turn the opacity down, right? I'm not quite convinced that's the way to go here. 90% looks pretty good. 88% looks pretty good. So let's turn it down a tiny bit. And we're still going to mask this ghost out over here. So I'm going to go at 50% again. You see how that just disappears? Make sure I'm keeping the texture in that house. Okay, now do I want to paint the street out? Yeah, so the street has gotten really nice and bright in front of the car. I like what's happening underneath here with the cobblestones. But I'm just going to paint back in this dark in front of the car. I like to keep it a little bit darker. I didn't like that one. I like to keep it a little bit darker in front of the car so that your attention goes forward instead of on the road there. Okay, I like what's happening there. Next layer. So literally we just keep building on this layer after layer. Okay, I'm not convinced that one is doing anything I need either. It's lighting up the street even more and giving us one more streak of light. I'm not convinced we need 2 streaks of light. Let's try turning the opacity down on this one. I like that better already, so the streak of light kind of fades out a little bit. Much nicer. Let's give it a mask. Now notice I'm using a really big brush here. So when you're doing something there you want really subtle, I'm using 30% opacity. I'm using a really soft brush. My hardness is at 14. And a big brush so that you can see how big my brush is there, circle. Okay, so that it's really just subtle on the edge. Okay. You want your adjustments to be so that you can't tell something was done. If you can tell Photoshop was done and what's where you can see the retouching, it's not a good job, okay, in my opinion. Okay, and the last layer, we've got some really nice light happening on this building over here. That's kind of cool. It's lighting up the street again, and it's lighting up the building on the other side. So I like what's happening on the right hand side of the car, but not what's happening over here because it's getting a little too bright on this building. So I want to cut that down. So I want to keep the attention on our car. And let's keep that dark. Okay, it's lighting up this up nice. Now if you didn't want these wires lit up, we could maybe mask those out because I might end up retouching them out in the first place later anyways, because they're kind of distracting coming out of the top there. Okay, so we could mask those out. Right, that's looking pretty good. So let's take a look at our before. So Alt, click on the bottom one again. Turn it on. Turn them off. Turn them on. And we got no ghosts. We got the light where we want it. looks pretty good. Okay, so if we're happy with this, if we want to clone out these wires, what you want to do is there's a move in Photoshop that requires like multiple fingers. And let me see if I can remember. I often forget. I think it's Command Alt Shift E. Yes. Hey, got it first shot. So what it's done is it's stamped a new layer that has all of the things that we just did into one layer. So if I want to do any cloning, I can do it right on this layer. I'm just going to zoom in so we can see these wires. Right? And we can use a cloning tool, or we can try a patch tool. We can try a few different ways. Right, let's see what the cloning tool does. The cloning tool does a pretty good job when you don't have anything in close proximity, right? If I kind of go too close to the car, you'll see what happens. It kind of pulls the color of the car up, so we don't want that. And I notice there's a couple of spots of light up there. So you want to get close, and then once you get close, you need to change to either the cloning tool or to let's use a cloning tool, clone stamp tool, and we're going to use darken. Okay, so the mode is darken and opacity is 70%. You want to use either the cloning tool or the other healing brush that is a targeted healing brush. Okay, so with the cloning stamp tool, you have to select the area that you're going to clone from, which is over here. And I'm doing this at 70%, and then just paint away your thing slowly. Okay, let's zoom back out. And we got rid of those nasty wires. Perfect. Now there's a couple of other things that I would like to do in terms of darkening the edges, and I'm going to add some clarity and so on, and I'm going to actually do that back in Lightroom, or I could do it using some filters and plugins and things in Photoshop if you have those, like Topaz or anything like that. So I'm just going to save, so literally Command S. And when you do that, when you've pulled your images from Lightroom as a file, as a layered document like this, and you hit save, once it's saved, your Lightroom will actually re-import it for you automatically. So as soon as I hit close here, let's hope that it's all done saving. It's going to take us back to Lightroom and import the image. One thing to remember is that if we're in a collection, it's not going to put it in the collection, so we'll have to go find it. I'm going to meet you back in Lightroom in a moment. Okay, so here we are back in Lightroom. Now keep in mind that this was the original version that I had done, the finished version. So the new one that I just did is not showing up. Remember I said that they will not automatically appear in your collection because it will show up in the folder where the images live, but you have to add it to the collection. So to find it, I'm just going to right click on one of these guys and go to folder in library. So that's going to take me to where the files live. Okay. Now let's just look through. So you're looking for a PSD file. I believe that's the one I did from before, and there it is. Okay, if it is not showing, so that's the one I did from before, this is the new one. If it is not showing, what you might have to do is just resort your images. Okay, so if you have them sorted by capture time, for example, and it's not showing, perhaps you need to sort by file name and it will show up. Okay, so there's our new image. And we can add that down to the collection that I was working on if you like. So we can go back here. And we're just going to finish that up. So we'll go back to the develop module. That's a quick D on the keyboard shortcut. Okay, so the only thing I want to do in here is what I do with all my pictures is I check my whites and my blacks. So that's an alt click on the black slider. So I'm clicking on the black slider and holding the alt key. And when I pull it to the left, it's going to show me areas that are clipping. Clipping is dark with black with no detail, right? And in the black area, you want to have a little bit of clipping, right? Now that's the night sky, so it should be clipped. In the white areas, you don't want any clipping. So this is where I'm actually going to pull the highlights down. Okay, same alt trick works on the highlight slider to just keep the detail in those highlights. If you leave it where it is, okay, just look at the areas that are clipped. So it's that doorway, it's the headlight, and it's some specular highlights on the grill. Now, if you're okay with that, which actually artistically is fine, okay, you can just leave it there. But if you know you want detail in those areas, then pull it down a little bit. Okay, now we know we've got detail. Okay, clarity. So I'm going to show you a trick here. We're going to do it to the maximum just to show you the effect. Okay, so I'm going to go plus 100 clarity. Okay, so I really like what happens on the car when we do this, but not so much on everything else around it because it gets really busy. There's too much detail. Okay, but I'll show you a little trick. When you use the adjustment brush, which you can get to up here, or click K on your keyboard, right? Double click the word effect to reset it. When you paint with minus 100 clarity, okay, so remember we applied plus 100 to the entire picture. If I'm going to paint with minus 100, I'm going to use my tablet again. Now I'm just going to use a large brush. I'm going to paint at 100% opacity or flow. Okay, so opacity in Photoshop is the same as flow right here in Lightroom. Okay, at 100% density. So I'm going to paint over the other areas that are around the car. So everything else besides the car is going to get minus 100. Okay, so what's happening is they cancel each other out. So when you have plus 100 and minus 100, they actually equal 0, right? Mathematically, well, they do in Lightroom as well. So if you want your clarity to only apply to a certain area, you can do this little trick where you just paint it out on the places you don't want. Right, now I'm just going to hit the O key to check my masking. So that's just showing me where it's applying, and I've got some on the car. So I want to clear that out, and I just clicked Alt to have my eraser show up. Okay, so all these little keyboard shortcuts really help to try and avoid using the mouse, because I hate using the mouse. All right, that looks pretty good. Okay, so all that is doing, you'll see, is, I'll just turn it off and on, is changing the clarity of the rest of the picture back to sort of normal or 0. So I'm going to apply that. I'm actually going to change that to minus 50. Okay? And then I'm going to change this to plus 50. So I did it at 100 just so you could see the effect. Okay, so now let's just look at it before and after. So it's just adding that kind of crispy, really nice contrast onto the car, but not onto the rest of the picture. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do is just add a vignette on the edge, and I like using the post-crop vignette under the effects tool. A little trick that I use, and I teach my students in my Lightroom classes, is turn the amount down a lot so you can see that it's really dark. You would never want to do that because it's very dramatic. It's too harsh. It's an obvious vignette. You want it to be subtle. Turn your feather down to 0. Okay, now it's really obvious. Okay, the reason for that is it allows you to set your roundness and your midpoint, because then you can see where it's actually going. Okay, so I'm going to set the shape and decide where I want it to go. Right, then I'm going to put my feather back up to something high, and then I'm going to change my amount. Okay, so now I know where it's applying, and I'm just going to change the amount. I like to use color priority. It kind of makes it a little bit softer. So see how subtle that is? Right? You don't want to know there's a vignette on there. You want to do it so that your eye is drawn into the image a little bit more, but have it be very subtle. Another way you can do that is using the graduated filter, right? Or the M keyboard shortcut, or this click right up here. Okay? So M. With the graduated filter, it allows you to do any of these adjustments in graduating from the edge of your image in. So when you click with these little crosshairs and drag in, okay, it's going to apply whatever you do. We'll just do a dark one again. From here to there is the range, and it fades itself out. So we want to darken a little bit. We can lower the highlights, that type of thing. Again, keep it subtle. You don't want it to be obvious that, oh my goodness, I've applied a vignette. Okay, so you want it subtle. Okay, the wider you make your spread, the more it fades, okay, just like your brush. And the beautiful thing about it is you can always adjust it. So you can apply these and close it, and if you decide that your vignette is too harsh, or you want to pull it back, it's fully adjustable. Okay? So that is another beautiful thing about Lightroom. It's completely non-destructive editing, which means you can come back and fix it or change it at any time. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with the way this is looking. If you want to have a little more attention on your car, we could apply a very slight vignette on this edge as well and really drag the eye in. Maybe just on the exposure, not on the highlights. I want to keep that streak. Okay, so really subtle. So now the eye really comes into that car. Okay. So you get to decide. Ultimately, you are the artist. You are the photographer. You get to decide how you want your image to look. But that is the final image that I'm going to be happy with for today. Let's just compare to the one I did previously, just for fun. And you can see they're pretty similar. It looks like I've toned down the one on the left, the wall a little bit more, and darkened the sidewalk and the street a little bit more. You could do this image 5 different times and end up with 5 completely different results, and all of them could be different but fantastic. So I hope you enjoyed that quick tutorial on how to put a layered file together, and get out and try some light painting and give this a go. Take care, and we'll see you next time.